Every MLB trade deadline, there's teams that have great deadlines and are obvious winners, and then there's always the obvious losers, and in today's video, I'll be taking a look at the 5 biggest losers of this year's trade deadline. Before we jump in though, if you're a part of the 88.8% of viewers that aren't subscribed to this channel, make sure to press that button for me, and let's jump right into today's video. To start the video, I got the Boston Red Sox at my number 5 spot. The Red Sox came into this deadline on July 23rd at 53-47, which is 4th in the AL East, but they were still only 2 games back from the 3rd wildcard spot and got as close as 1.5 games back at the August 1st deadline. Now, a team sitting so close to the wildcard spot would be expected to maybe bring in some guys to help make a playoff push, or even some thought the Red Sox might just look at their roster and sell some pieces off to get some prospects. But they really didn't do either of those at all. The Red Sox were in need of middle infield help and maybe could have added a starting pitcher in the mix as well, but instead they made very little movement. Their 2 biggest trades were selling off a struggling Enrique Hernandez back to the Dodgers and then bringing in third baseman Luis Urias from the Brewers. These moves didn't really mean much, as in the Hernandez trade and the other deals they had in this year's deadline, they only brought in low-end prospects that didn't add any new top 30 prospects to their team's farm, and the roster and the MLB level didn't really change at all either, other than Luis Urias. It wouldn't have made this list if it wasn't for the other teams in the AL East and the AL as a whole getting better, such as the Orioles, Rays, Blue Jays, Angels, and Astros all getting better at this year's deadline, and that's why I have them at my number 5 spot. At number 4, I have the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds are in a heated battle with the Brewers for the NL Central, and the Cubs are coming up fast as well, and the Brewers and Cubs both had great deadlines in my opinion, bringing in great talent, while the Reds stayed pretty calm this deadline, making only 2 trades, sending out Joel Kuhnel, who has an 11.81 ERA, for cash to Houston, so that's a good move since you didn't have to DFA him and you got something for him, I guess. But the only person they brought in was Sam Moll from the Oakland A's, who should strengthen the lefty side of the bullpen, having a 4.34 ERA and a 3.25 FIP, which I think is an alright pickup, but it doesn't move the needle on this team a ton, but it still helps, I guess. But being the team that's getting chased and being in first place, you needed to make more moves, as I think the Reds should make a run at this in the playoffs this year, and I thought they needed to bring in a starting pitcher, and we saw plenty of those moves this deadline, and it surprised me they didn't find a way to bring one in, but this team is still very young and have a very bright future, and that's why they weren't higher on this list. At number 3, I have the Mariners. The Mariners were yet another team that was in the wild card race, as they were 3.5 games back from the wild card, and they were pretty middle of the road at 55-52. So I'm not mad that they sold some guys to get some prospects and depth, but the prospects and depth they got just weren't good in the Paul Sewald trade. This trade is absolutely crazy to me. I mean, he's one of the best relievers in baseball, posting a 2.93 ERA and 21 saves, and has another year of control, and they gave him up for a set of players I don't think have much promise, and Josh Rojas, who has a 596 OPS this year in the big leagues, as well as with Dominic Canzone, who's a borderline MLB AAA player as of now, that could be the best player from this deal for the Mariners, as he's only 25 and could be a good outfield piece the Mariners are going to need to develop. They also brought in Ryan Bliss, who's just getting into AAA, but he also isn't even a top 30 prospect in this farm. The only piece I like from this deal is Dominic Canzone, who also isn't very much of an established player yet, and I think is going to need to be developed a lot. This is all they could get from one of the best closers in baseball, and they brought in no other notable prospects during all their other trades, which is why I think the Mariners did not do enough to move in a better direction, and that's why they're at my number 3 spot. At number 2, I have the New York Yankees. The Yankees this deadline made 2 moves to bring in reliever Kenyon Middleton from the White Sox, and then they threw some cash Texas's way for Spencer Howard. Now, I know you can never have enough pitching, but bullpen was not what the Yankees need to focus on at this year's deadline, as they already have the best bullpen ERA by a good margin as well, at 3.06 ERA compared to the second place Mariners at 3.56. That is why I put them at number 2, because they addressed something that wasn't much needed, and they didn't sell either at 3.5 games back like the Mariners did, so they really made no progress in my eyes, because they should have went out and got some bats to help give Aaron Judge some protection in this lineup, because the 2 players that are supposed to protect Judge in this lineup, in Giancarlo Stanton and Anthony Rizzo, have been pretty mediocre this year, posting a 100 OPS plus and a 96 OPS plus, but Rizzo is also going on the IL as of now, and the rest of the lineup has below a 100 OPS plus besides Gleyber Torres at 108, and that's why they take my number 2 spot, as I think they had an awful deadline. And at my number 1 worst trade deadline of the 2023 MLB trade deadline was the San Francisco Giants. The Giants came in barely safe at 2 games ahead, holding the number 1 wildcard spot in the National League, and I thought along with many others that they could use some of their young players to capitalize on this market and add some starting pitching help and maybe an outfielder to help with their depth, and they decided not to do any of that and not capitalize on any of these pitchers in this market. and would try to help with the outfield side, but they brought in maybe one of the worst players in the MLB this season in AJ Pollock, who has posted a 49 OPS plus while batting 169 and has also posted a negative .5 R-WAR as well. They honestly probably could have got Pollock through the waiver wire because I bet if he stayed with the Mariners, he would have been DFA'd. This trade deadline was not at all what I expected from the Giants, and honestly, they still would have made this list, but wouldn't have been first if they just didn't make any moves at all, and I think this was the complete wrong way to handle this deadline for the Giants. With that being said, those are my top 5 worst deadlines from this year's trade deadline, so if you guys enjoyed today's video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.